If you are just walking into the grocery store with this belief that, okay, can't get anything frozen because that's bad, can't get anything canned because that's bad, you're writing off things that actually are probably better for you in some cases, easier for you, more likely to turn into a nourishing meal for you down the road. You have to be willing to play the long game when you are talking about metabolic restoration. You cannot have your eyes fixed on this short term of, I just want everything to be better in the next 3 to 6 months. That's not how the body works. But I think that sometimes there is more playing out in our bodies than just what our first person narrative of the story that we have access to.
What does daily, real life, actual nourishment look like for modern women? This is the question that came up after my recent episode, The Epidemic of Women Undernourishing, with today's returning guest, Ashley Wulkan. Ashley is a nutritionist, herbalist, clinical practitioner, and mother of a sweet little toddler. And our episode really seemed to touch something that is very alive for women, as it is for me. I loved that conversation, and I loved this conversation today, where we are answering your questions. Biggest response I've gotten to an episode in a very long time. And both Ashley and I received many questions, and we noticed the common theme was, how do we take what you all talked about in that episode and apply it to daily, busy mom life or working life or burnt out woman life or perimenopausal chaos life? So that's what we're here to talk about today. We discuss the slippery edge that we're all walking between not being consumed by food fear and over restricting it all, while still having healthy discernment around what we put into our bodies in an insane informational landscape. We talk macros and how to calculate your daily calorie needs, how to know when you're nourished, including answering a question of what if you gain weight once you start nourishing, and the ever controversial topic of fasting and whether or not that's a good idea for women. Listen for my sort of extreme personal story with that one. And then, as usual, we continue the conversation over at patreon.com/medicine stories, answering more listener questions. We cover what it looks like to eat enough carbohydrates in a day, what counts as a healthy carb. Do you need to soak and sprout them and go to the absolute edge of your abilities and time and thinking powers to extract every single nutrient out of every single food you eat, or not? And how carbs relate to adrenal health. We talk about if we think it's important to eat differently at different times in the menstrual cycle, whether or not women who feel highly sensitive or neurodivergent need special nutritional guidance, how properly nourishing the body might influence hormones and libido, and whether or not it's important to buy organic. We break that conversation down into produce, grains, meat, and dairy, and I think you might be surprised at our answers to some of these questions. My thinking has definitely evolved on some of those topics in recent years. My vision for medicine stories has always been that listening feels like lying outside in the sun on a warm day, like beautiful April day on which I'm recording this, body just fully open and relaxed and feeling like home, and with the scent of flowers in the air, like the lilacs I was smelling this morning, with loving and supportive friends within reach. In a world with endless content noise, I want this podcast to feel like a soft landing place. Most women I know are dealing with health concerns on some level, and these topics can be challenging at best and panic-inducing at worst. So I aim to bring grounded clarity and nervous system soothing insights to these discussions. And choosing ad-free, long-form content over catering to algorithms or clickbaity titles and clips is really intentional. These days, choosing this path often feels futile, like I am screaming into the abyss, and social media optics can warp perceptions of other people's success. But the truth is that medicine stories could use more support to continue producing this sort of content in today's media ecosystem. Everything has changed so much in the past few years, and I know it's affected us all. I work hard to make being a patron worthwhile, and the $5 a month donations that come in through Patreon are truly the only reason I'm able to make this show. So thank you for speaking with your dollars and pushing back against the vagaries of the attention economy by supporting small, thoughtful creators trying to hang on to our humanity and yours. Okay, I'm excited to get this one out there as I know you all loved Ashley's compassionate, grounded approach to women's health and nutrition in our last interview. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to move ourselves closer to true nourishment. Ashley, welcome back. As you know, we had a really robust reaction to our episode from last month, the Epidemic of Women Undernourishing. People loved it, and we got a lot of questions, and we noticed recurring themes in those questions. So we thought we would come back and answer some of the more specific questions that we got.
Yes, what an honor to have landed with so many and to be able to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. We when we were talking afterward, it was like we gave sort of the philosophy, the theory, the framework, and a lot of women were asking for more practical steps. So we're gonna do that today. But I wanted to start with this is more of a philosophical question, but it came up a lot in women's reactions and questions, and that is, and I think about this all the time, and I'm curious what you have to say, because I personally don't think there's an answer. Like where do we draw the line between not living in food fear all the time and being discerning about what we're eating?
Yeah, it is a challenging time. Being a modern human and navigating the modern food landscape is really complicated. And there's so much noise, especially around these specific topics. Food fear, I think that's something I want to say around 2015 maybe is when the intuitive eating, health at every size framework became really popular, and the conversation around food fear really started. And I think that was really needed for a lot of the sort of orthorexia that we were starting to see coming up around that time. But what gets lost in there is the nuance around our food ecosystem and how so much of what we're navigating when it comes to food is not relevant to us biologically. So I'm really passionate about this topic and this conversation because I think it's important to sort of anchor our bodies in something real. And it's very easy if we're just saying all foods fit, health at every size, just don't be afraid, eat whatever, all food is good food. There's a time and a place when that is incredibly beneficial and therapeutic. But if we don't step back and define what food actually is to the human body, I think a lot gets lost. And I think that the demographic of people listening to this are probably already there. They're probably not the people who are coming in already eating ultra processed foods, and we're having to have that conversation around moving them towards more whole foods. So when I hear this question coming up and this idea coming up, the first thing I always say is all whole foods are good foods. So every natural protein plant that grows on this earth, like plants and animals, are always going to be okay. And the things that come from plants and animals, one step removed, those things are all going to be good and nourishing. It's when we start to add a lot of steps of refinement, fortification, stabilization, we're packaging, we're shipping, we're consuming things that are completely not relevant to the place that we live, the body that evolved on this terrain, that's when things get a little bit iffy. So it's a question that I sort of answer differently depending on who's asking it. But what I'm anticipating is that the people who are asking this question in this context are mostly already eating whole foods, if not exclusively. And we're now in the weeds of macronutrient distribution ratios, or okay, but fish has polyunsaturated fat, and I heard PUFAs are bad, and nuts and seeds have PUFAs, and what about grains? And what if I can't soak and sprout and ferment them? And what if the beef isn't grass fed? Once we get into the weeds there, I just like to kind of ground that all of the things that came from the earth are going to be appropriate for the human body. And that discernment is how many steps removed from that are we in terms of processing, right? We all know ultra-processed food is not a good thing for us. And then getting to know our own bodies and responses around things like the grain question. How important is it for you to soak and sprout, or whatever steps might be getting in the way of you and feeling optimal? What sort of resources do you have access to around the animal protein that you're eating for it to be pasture raised and grass fed and all of that? You can sort of rank it as good, better, best, but we are starting with good food when we're eating whole food. And maybe there could be something even better, and maybe there's a best option in this category. But if you can't access the best when you're eating a whole food, what you're eating is still good. And I find that most people, when they really start to understand and embody that concept, there's a bit of an exhale and a little bit more trust that comes in around food. Have you found that?
Yeah, that is so helpful. That's such a helpful answer for me, because I'm still definitely disentangling 25 years of food rules and food fear, and that's helpful for me right now. I'm like, okay, gonna take that and gonna ground that in my own body, and I'm glad you said all food is good food, because years ago I was listening to like a body positivity, like fat influencer woman's podcast, being like, okay, what's this all about? Like, yeah, that sounds good. Body positive. She had a nutritionist on, and at one point the nutritionist says all food is good food, and the host goes, I'm going to stop you right there and say all food is good food, and they both cheer, and I'm like stunned. I'm like, how can a nutritionist say that? Like, what is her job even then? But then I'm understanding where they're coming from, of course, like what like cultural issue they're trying to sort of overcompensate for, and how they are trying to like mute food fear by saying that, but how it's obviously untrue. Or like you're bringing in the difference between whole foods and processed foods. And then there's also the difference between bodies and health status. Like if my 9-year-old had a bag of Cheetos today, which she's not going to, but her grandma might have some for her when we go visit her this summer, because she did last summer. That was her first introduction to Cheetos, and she's like losing her mind over how good they are. She's going to be okay, but if someone in a very different body, older, metabolic issues has Cheetos, that's going to be really different. So or I follow this woman who's like this huge public health platform on social media. And she just posted, there's no good or bad foods. Food has no morality. And I'm like, okay, I see what you're saying about morality. Food does not have any morality, but of course there are good and bad foods depending on like the person's body who's eating it. And
yeah, it's really hard because you really have to understand in nutrition, there is such a different set of issues depending on who you're talking to, different set of barriers, different set of questions. And one of the reasons that I don't work in public health, why that didn't resonate with me, is that you have to dilute the message so much that I'm not saying that's not important work. It's incredibly important work, and I have so much respect for the people doing it. But for me, I was losing passion when I was having to say things that are going to apply to everybody. So you talked about the difference between, we talked about ultra processed food and versus whole foods, and a body that's really metabolically well versus someone who is not metabolically well. And underneath all of that, there's the difference between eating and not eating. And that's the first thing that we need to reconcile. One of the questions that came up when I posted in my stories that we were going to be having this follow-up conversation was very specific. It was from somebody, and I answered it right away because I needed to. And they asked, when they're navigating, it was this exact theme, food fear versus discernment. And sometimes when I don't have access to really good nutrient-dense food, I will just not eat rather than to eat something that is, I can't remember the exact language, but around like empty food or empty calories or something to that effect. And I asked, what does that mean to you? Can you give me an example of empty nutrition or nutrient devoid food or whatever you're saying? And the example that they gave me was mashed potatoes. If I only have mashed potatoes in the house, I won't eat. And this is where, when you have a background in nutrition, when you went to school and studied nutrition science, I think our superpower is to overcome all this cultural narrative around, whatever, white food is bad food, or like don't eat carbs, or whatever the thing of the moment is, because it changes all the time. But when I think about mashed potatoes, I actually think that's an incredibly nourishing food. I would never forego eating entirely because all I have is mashed potatoes. In fact, it's something I make an effort to include into my diet. So it's that area where we're losing people. There's so much noise. There's so much, well, this could be better than that. And this one has glyphosate, or this one has a different fatty acid profile. But if we aren't meeting people and checking first, okay, but are you eating or not eating? Because actually eating Cheetos is better than not eating and running out of energy. I spent a summer when I was in school fundraising for Doctors Without Borders, like on the street, talking to strangers, going up to strangers on the street and asking them to donate money. It was not a good match for my personality. But my pitch was always, as a nutrition student, to talk about the little nutrient packets that they distribute in famines and wars and times when people truly have no food and we're dealing with acute malnutrition. And it's like peanut butter mixed with canola oil, mixed with every unmethylated, terrible form of synthetic vitamin that you can imagine. And this is life-saving, nourishing food for the people who are in an acute malnutrition situation. So I really want to ground this conversation in the understanding that there is a wide spectrum when we're talking about food and what's good and what's not, all the way down to somebody literally starving and having their life saved by canola oil. So when we think about that person, can we maybe chill out a little bit about what oil was used to cook the food at the restaurant that we go to once a month? Or if all we have to eat is mashed potatoes, is it still worth eating? Like, it just gives you that context around the day-to-day food choices most of us are making, right?
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If someone is really under eating calorically, I'd rather them eat Cheetos than eat nothing. Because at the very foundation, at the very basis, like you said, getting enough calories, eating or not, is the most important question. It reminds me of, I read this children's book about the history of top ramen, which most of us hear top ramen, we're probably like, oh, terrible processed food, But it was developed by a man somewhere in Asia, I forget which country exactly, to combat malnutrition and to get food into the hands of poor people who might not even have cooking big kitchens to cook for, and it was like this amazing life-saving intervention. And so, yeah, exactly. I mean, a few years ago, I thought potatoes and oatmeal were like bad foods, not morally, but nutritionally, empty. Yeah, like you said, pretty much empty calorically, or not empty. I don't even know what I thought. I just believed people who talked about how they weren't worthwhile foods. And now I eat both of those all the time, and I love them. And when I put it into Chronometer, which we will also talk about tracking or not, because that's a big question. But I love seeing which nutrients these foods have and being like, wow, I was dead wrong that entire time.
Yes, that's one of my favorite things. I always take little pictures of my food and I try to throw it up in my stories with the incredible benefits that just regular everyday foods have that most people don't think about, especially in this information age where we're like on to the next thing. People are studying like cellular metabolism, listening to Ray Peat lectures and stuff, and they don't even know that this basic food that they have in their pantry or in their fridge, all of the nutrients, all of the polyphenols, all of the different components of that food, and the body of research behind what those things do to our bodies, and how I just want people to get as excited for that as they get excited for this other deeper stuff, which is great. And I love that too, but it's only helpful if we have the foundation tended to, where we're already layering that on top of, okay, we're eating enough, we have a basic understanding of nutrients, we're eating whole foods, and then we can go dive into that. But otherwise, it's just, it ungrounds you. It makes you feel anxious and confused. And I find people are just less likely to eat, or less likely to eat a wide variety of foods, or less likely to go out and have social connection with their food because they're scared of what's at the restaurants or whatever. And none of these things contribute to our overall well-being when we look beyond optimal nutrient status at every moment of the day, right?
Well, yeah, you were asking me in our last episode if I like cooking now, and I've just been reflecting on why I just felt so frozen around food for so long. And that is why, because nothing ever seemed nutritious enough. Well, I don't have enough vegetables. I didn't buy enough vegetables at the store. So why even make this meal and eat it? And it was so convoluted in my head for so long. And like so many people, I think I approached nutrition around what's bad and what to cut out. So I love your stories. I love how you're frequently posting what you made, what you're eating, and what nutrients it has, because that is such a healthier and more relaxing way to approach meal making.
Yeah. And yeah, little things. We can even get more into it, but like sometimes people are really surprised to see that I eat frozen vegetables, but I live in Northern Ontario. It is March. This is like peak food scarcity in the ecosystem that I live in. This is probably when people would like die of hunger in previous less fortunate generations. And also, it's affordable. It's pre-cut. I have a baby. I can get organic frozen, where I might not be able to pay that little for organic if it was going to be fresh, and it's shipped all the way from California, which is like at least a week away. All of these things go into the decisions that we make day to day. But if you are just walking into the grocery store with this belief that, okay, can't get anything frozen because that's bad, can't get anything canned because that's bad, you're writing off things that actually are probably better for you in some cases, easier for you, more likely to turn into a nourishing meal for you down the road than if you're keeping yourself restricted to this small list of things that probably didn't even come from somewhere real. Like it's probably not even coming from anyone worth listening to, because people worth listening to around nutrition will never scare you away from eating. That's like the qualifier. If somebody's scaring you away from food, they probably don't have anything worth saying about food, because people who studied food, who work in clinical care, supporting people with food, are excited about food and that's going to rub off on you when you're talking to them.
We are just about 6 months away from my girls' trip to Costa Rica to relax in mineral hot springs and just marinate in 6 days without responsibilities in a beautiful Central American national park together. If you've been considering joining me for the Healing Waters Nature Immersion Getaway this coming November 3rd through 8th, now is a great time to grab your spot, because the trip coordinator, Trova Trip, is having an anniversary sale. Tuesday, April 21st through Thursday, April 23rd only. You can use coupon code TROVAVERSE200 to get $200 off your ticket. The link to learn more about the trip and the coupon code for you to copy and paste are in the show notes. I would really love to meet you there and to melt in those hot springs with you.
Wow. Yep. Yep. I mean, people like, I always go back to Dave Asprey because he influenced me and so many of us. He is not a nutritionist. Or the woman whose book I read when I was 17, Mary Lou Henner's Total Health Makeover, not a nutritionist. And that book is what at that tender age just subconsciously seeped this idea into my mind that there was like an optimal way to eat and a not optimal way to eat. And that fucked me up for 25 years. And you're right, like the nutritionists that I follow on Instagram now, which it is definitely what the algorithm gives me, are like you, they're focusing on what nutrients are in this meal and like how can we make these meals accessible. And I mean, totally, I for years was like, if I don't buy the local vegetables myself and take them home and chop them and cook them myself, it's like doesn't count somehow. But now, yeah, we do frozen. I mean, canned vegetables are great, like salsa, even those are vegetables, that counts as vegetables. It has those nutrients.
And do you eat more vegetables now?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about macros. Like, okay, so people maybe who don't know my story, I was totally against tracking. I thought it was eating disorder adjacent. I thought I just would take too much time and work. And I definitely I didn't have what it takes to track. I didn't have the mental bandwidth at that time. But when I started, I found it extremely helpful for me. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It is a lot. I'm on my phone at the table sometimes, which I don't want to be. But for me, it has been worth it to see how I was eating. I was vastly undereating calorically and vastly overeating fat as the percentage of my macros. So correcting that helped. And now as I've gotten some more energy back, gotten my health into a better place, now I have the energy to look at the micronutrients too and be like, oh, I never get enough calcium in the day. How can I correct that? But even that's I'm still very low on some things. There's no perfection, I don't think. But I'm curious. So like, where do you stand on all that? Do you think about your macro ratio every day? What do you think people should be focusing on there?
Yeah, we're going to take me out of it because I'm just going to self-disclose that I for sure am not the most metabolically well that I've been in my life at a year postpartum. I've done a really good job of eating enough this whole year, but I have relied on a lot more fat than I probably thrive with. And it's just little things. And this is why I'm so grateful to be tuned in, because I've noticed like, my morning appetite's kind of sucking lately. And just things. So all that to say, no, I don't track. Yes, I probably should be reconnecting with that. What my approach is when I start working with somebody, I will usually begin by just highlighting what are the nutrients of concern. If we're doing an HTMA, what's going on with your macro minerals? What does it look like to eat enough of those? I usually start with giving them a bunch of food lists, and then I will just plant the seed that, hey, if it resonates with you, you can download this app, plug in a couple days worth of food. Let's just see where your starting point is, right? Let's see how many calories you're eating. Let's see what that macronutrient distribution ratio looks like. What are you getting in a day? And some people are like you, where they just feel that there is absolutely no way that I have the capacity for that. It also might, like you said, eating disorder adjacent. Some people really do have histories and things they've overcome that make that feel less accessible to them. So it's never necessary, but I do think that it's an incredible tool. And the tracking isn't the issue. It's the cultural narrative around food. That's the issue. It's making it harder for us to learn about food because we're making it mean something that it doesn't necessarily mean. So taking the time to track what you're eating and learn what is coming in with that is really no different than taking the time to track what you're spending and learning where your money is going, and wanting to have better financial health starts with tracking. But for some reason, when we apply that to the nutrition conversation, it's just a very different energy that comes up. So I think of it that way. And if anyone listening is wondering about this, first you have to audit yourself. What comes up when you think about tracking your food intake? What are you afraid of if you are afraid of something? If what you're afraid of is that you're going to be spiraling into fear and stress, or you're going to deliberately be putting less on your plate because it would be more work to track it, or because maybe you have a number ingrained in your head from years ago of a certain number of calories that's acceptable per meal or per day, and you're not going to be able to really keep that number out of your head and just let the tracking be the tracking. So if either of those things is going to be the case, okay, maybe now's not the time. Maybe we start with just eating more. Maybe you'll have more energy and more capacity for that down the road. But if you were feeling incredibly stressed out and fearful by the thought of looking at what you were spending and where your money was going, your financial advisor probably wouldn't say like, oh, okay, well, don't worry about it then. So I sort of think that at some point in everyone's journey, if we are looking to deepen our knowledge of nutrition, which we really all should be, because we all have to eat 3+ times a day. So we should be doing that with a little bit of intention. This is a valuable tool. This is an area, actually, wouldn't it be cool if instead of having to plug everything into Chronometer, you could just take a picture and like AI could do it for? Why aren't we using AI for this?
You can.
Is that real?
Chronometer. Okay. I was going to say, when you were done, the first thing I was going to say is Chronometer just put like an AI option there where you take a photo. And I've done it a few times where I do that and then I measure, and sometimes it's super accurate and sometimes it's not so accurate, but it is better than nothing.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. We have AI tools now. That just really goes to tell you how long it's been since I logged into my account. The world is AI now on the other side of me having a baby. And I think it's really helpful. But like I said, it's not the only tool to start with. So even just familiarizing yourself with, okay, what foods are high protein, what foods are high potassium or magnesium or whatever it is that you're focusing on. And that can be good foundational. But I'm not against tracking. And I do think that it's at least as helpful of a tool as any lab work that we can order. So I do think it has a place in most people's work around any sort of health improvements that they're chasing.
Mm-hmm. It also has, if you're eating a packaged food like your frozen vegetables, it has a QR or a barcode scanner. So you don't, almost any food you're going to eat is already in Chronometer at this point from the community of users who have been using it for so many years. So, and it just gets better and better. There's a ton of features of it too. Like I'm just always discovering new features. Well, do you have a macro recommendation?
Yeah. I always want to be careful what I'm saying when I know that a lot of people are listening.
Yeah.
Usually
give general advice, give public health advice, please, Ashley.
It's so hard because obviously my greatest passion is really diving into this stuff, but also not wanting to give information that's just going to confuse or stress anyone out. So in general, I think most people are going to respond generally favorably to if we're doing 40% carbs, 30 protein, 30 fat is a good starting place for most people. When I started my career, that was like so radical to say. I remember talking about 40, 30, 30, and it was like the dietitians that I went to school with were like, you can't say that. And now it's
the carbs, because too high of carbs?
Too low of carbs, because we were trained that it's like 65%.
Wow. Okay.
So to be recommending that people eat that protein at the time, which is laughable now, because now it's actually like a moderate protein compared to what's out there in the socials. But yeah, 40, 30, 30, I've always been a fan of it since the very beginning of my career. It's just one thing that I always come back to in terms of good starting point. Some people are going to feel better with more carbs than 40%. Some people are going to feel better. I don't really think anyone needs more than 30% protein. It's more the carbs and the fat that we're going to be playing with. So if we have an HTMA, sometimes I'll have, really slow oxidizers doing a little bit more of the carbs and a little bit less of the fat. Did I say slow? I hope I said slow, because it's the fast. Yeah. So then if we have really fast oxidizers, we're doing a little bit more the opposite. I see it a lot when I work with mothers and their children. So you can really see mom's metabolism is very downregulated. And on the flip side, her kid is like burning through everything. So a helpful way to explain that when you're working with a family is really, okay, so mom's going to put more of the carbs on her plate and, maybe eat the white meat of the whole chicken that you roasted. You're going to have the breast, and you're going to give the dark meat to your kids, and maybe you're going to throw on a drizzle of olive oil or some extra avocado or extra fat in there for them. So even though I know for some people listening to numbers and percentages can feel overwhelming, when you have support in applying these concepts, it should be presented to you in a way that feels doable like that, where you don't necessarily have to be tracking everything, but you just understand, oh, I need a little bit more carbs and a bit less fat. And this other person over here needs a little bit more fat and maybe a little bit less carbs. But for the love of God, please do not anybody go and exceed 30% of your calories coming from proteins. It's just not good for the body.
Yeah. Yeah, I eat about 50% carbs and 25 of the other two, but that can I'm getting looser. Sometimes like the fat and the carbs exchange percentage points a little bit. And sometimes the protein's a little higher, but I still am in slow oxidation, and I had like overloaded gallbladder and liver, so less fat was better for me. And I was eating over 50% fat before I started tracking, and it was just bogging down my cellular metabolism.
A lot of women are. And also that's a big part of, for a lot of people, protein and fat feel like the only safe macronutrients.
Yes.
For a while, I don't know if it's as popular now, but you would always hear people say like protein, fat, and fiber. That was always the thing. Like when you're building your plate, protein, fat, and fiber. And all those things are important, but it does sort of undervalue carbohydrate. Like fiber is one type of carbohydrate, but it's only digestible to the microbes in your gut. So you're not really going to benefit from any energy coming from that. And it's really important. And even just the blood sugar conversation. So we're taking all these women, they're only eating protein, fat, and fiber, no carbs, lots of calories coming from fat. I've had clients where it's, 80% of their calories are coming from fat when they come to me, right? And they're saying, well, I have to keep my blood sugar stable. But not having cells that are sensitive to insulin isn't solved by not eating carbs. And actually, in many ways, we can argue a high-fat diet drives that more than anything else. So yeah, I love that you said that. And that's a part of your story, because realizing that all of our energy shouldn't be coming from fat, for a lot of women that I talk to in my practice as well, is a big part of them actually learning how to eat and realizing that carbohydrates are a safe macronutrient. In fact, that's where most of our energy should be coming from.
Yeah. And for anyone who missed it, we dive deeper into this in my most recent episode with Kaya of Fundamental Nourishment. And okay, so this brings me to this question. Now we're going to get more to exactly the questions that people sent in. Sounds silly, but if you're gaining weight, eating a richer, more nourishing diet, then should you cut back? How do you know when you are nourished enough? I want to say before you jump in that I think like me and part of these women coming to you eating 80% fat, a lot of us got the idea from Weston A. Price from keto that basically like nourishment meant fat. And so I think right now we're kind of in a moment where we're breaking that association and realizing that nourishment means a lot more than that. It means, everything, including all the micronutrients and not just fat. So yeah, that feels important.
Yeah. And okay, so the question is, how do you know when you're nourished enough? There's kind of layers.
How do you know when you're nourished enough, and what should you do if you're gaining weight? Does that mean you should like back off? So I'm thinking this woman might be thinking nourishment is like, high fat milk, high fat dairy, grass-fed beef all day, maybe.
Yeah, gotcha. So in terms of when the body is gaining weight, it's so hard to stay general here, right? I have so many follow-up questions to that would help me assess whether this is even a problem. I'm always on the body side. That is my whole shtick. I'm always on the body side. I always think that your body is right. So when your body is doing something that you don't like, I am on your body side, and I'm just trying to figure out what's the message here. What's the reason why your body's doing this, even if you don't like it. And sometimes the way that it's going to play out is that you don't like what the body's doing, we learn why and we shift it. And sometimes the way that it's going to play out is you don't like what your body's doing and we learn why, and you realize that that's incredibly valuable and you allow it to happen. So when it comes to weight gain, there's important context to be sought out there. So if you are coming from a history of really undernourishing, if you're highly stressed, like there are factors in your own health, present and past, which might make it so that your body either legitimately needs to gain weight, right? A lot of women, when they talk to me about their ideal weight, is like a good 10 to 20 pounds below what I would consider a healthy weight for them to sustain. So maybe the weight gain is actually needed in order for you to stay healthy, and then we need to address that. Sometimes if you go from long periods of undernourishment to all of a sudden giving your body all the nourishment that it needs. We talked about my salary analogy in the last episode. So if you have been living in poverty and you've been really struggling to have good resources coming in, and then all of a sudden you start getting consistent high paychecks, there might be a part of you that's like, this could be fleeting. I have been really broke in the past, so I'm going to spend some time saving and just sequestering away these resources before I start spending them. Your body could be doing that exact same thing. And sometimes the way to get the body to stop doing that is to just allow it to happen, allow the body to learn that she is safe and she is always going to have access to more nourishment. And weight will usually balance out. You have to be willing to play the long game when you are talking about metabolic restoration. You cannot have your eyes fixed on this short term of, I just want everything to be better in the next 3 to 6 months. That's not how the body works. You, assuming that you're more than 3 to 6 months old, have a little bit more history than, you've got more road behind you that we need to account for when we're considering what the road ahead of you is going to look like. But there's a really great piece to this question that I think we can ground in actual tangible, how do I know that I'm well nourished enough? How do I actually know if I'm eating enough or if I'm overeating, right? So if you're gaining weight and your pulse, if you check your pulse using like an app, or you can just, listen to it, do a timer old school like a doctor. If you're gaining weight and your pulse is consistently below like 75 beats per minute, that tells me that you're not in this high energy body that's using all of the resources, and you're just giving it so many that it's starting to save fat stores. If you're cold all the time, especially your hands and feet, if you're not sleeping, if you have irregular menstrual cycles, if you have any hypothyroid type of symptoms, and you're gaining weight on top of it, these are all signs to me that, okay, I don't really think the amount that you're eating is necessarily the issue. It's not that you're eating too many carbs. Maybe, like Amber said, there's some work to be done around how much of the energy is coming from fat in those cases. So maybe more carbs would be helpful here. But the body is telling us there's a bigger story that we need to hear versus just, okay, we'll eat less food, right? And the weight gain piece, I always like to treat on an individual basis because there are so many different reasons why women's bodies gain weight. And like I said, sometimes I really do think that that's necessary, even if you're not necessarily stoked about it. But if you are not feeling good and you're gaining weight because you're suddenly eating more, okay, so maybe increase slowly. Say you did your tracking for a few days, you realized you were eating like 1,400 calories a day or something. And we can talk about how to calculate how many calories you actually need to be eating. Let's say there's like a 1,000 calorie discrepancy there. And adding 1,000 calories a day all of a sudden might make you feel a little bit heavier, might not feel so good. Your body might need to slowly increase so that it can use that extra energy as energy versus just being weighed down by it. But everyone's different. So I hope that answer feels helpful. But there is a lot of variables that come down to the individual there.
One of the more helpful things I've realized from having these podcast conversations for almost 9 years now is that our health is just inextricably related to the world outside us. None of us is an island, and women are especially sensitive and responsive to external inputs. If you've ever applied an herbal body oil to your skin, then you've experienced the immediate warming and relaxing effect, that instant, invisible barrier it seems to put between you and the outside world with all its stresses and demands. But have you ever wondered how such a rapid and profound change in state is possible? I've been looking into it, and our skin is densely innervated with nerve fibers called C-tactile afferents that respond specifically to slow, warm, rhythmic touch. When you apply oil to skin in this way, you are communicating with your nervous system. This kind of contact helps shift the body toward parasympathetic regulation, softening tension, and lowering stress signaling, which is exactly what we hear from our customers all the time and what I've been experiencing since 2005. The active oiling allows for continuous, unbroken glide across the skin, which these fibers are tuned to receive. When infused with medicinal herbs, oiling takes on a whole new dimension of healing. At Mythic Medicine, my small handcrafted, family-run business that's been in operation since 2012, we slow infuse our oils, never heating them, which can cause oxidation, and we use gentle extraction methods that both optimize potency and extend shelf life. Herbal body oiling changed my life 20 years ago, and in the decades since, it has been an honor to introduce this practice to thousands of women feeling the weight of the world and aching for small moments of calm and self-connection, for a simple home herbal remedy that quickly works to shift the state of an overwhelmed nervous system. Check out our best-selling St. John's wort oil, our self-sanctuary oil made specifically for breasts, bellies, and a woman's most tender tissues, our violet leaf castor oil for deeper internal organ support, and more at mythicmedicine.shop.
Let's talk about how to know how many calories to eat, but I'm also personally curious. So my big weight gain happened 2-3 years ago now, like some in 2023 and then more in 2024, which really surprised me because I thought I was doing better at that time. I think it was a combination of, yes, starting to eat more and like nourish myself, but going too hard on fat until I started tracking, but also a 25 years of restricting and under eating and stress, like a crash, a full on crash. I think those two things came together at the same time to make me like really balloon in a very short period of time. How long? Someone like me, 45-year-old woman who restricted for 25 years in various ways. You gave it's not going to happen in 3 to 6 months. Like how, because I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, is it going to take, because I've heard people say too, as long as you were like doing the thing that made you unwell, it's going to take you that long to get better. I'm like, I don't think it's going to take me 25 years, but I just wonder about like the time period that I'm looking at in the future here. Cause also I'm doing a lot of things and just not losing the weight. And it's like, I mean, I have lost some, but I'm still like a good 30 pounds overweight and it's okay. And I'm looking forward to like that changing at some point.
Yeah, I hear you. I definitely don't subscribe to it's going to take as long as it was. That's just not how the body works. The body is really beautiful in that the moment that we decide to change, it responds. And that response starts immediately. So yes, there might be a period of time. There is always going to be a period of time. You can also think about illness. It doesn't take you as long as you were sick to recover from an illness. There is a period of convalescence, which is when you're not quite back, but you're not quite down, right? That little in-between period. But that doesn't last for as long as the illness lasted. So we can sort of anchor ourselves in that as evidence that the body doesn't take as long as it was in a state to change states. Spring and fall, the buffer season's always shorter than fall and winter. That's another sign from nature.
Summer and winter. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah.
Mhm.
um, the amount of time, I can't say, but my approach is that if we've been really putting our best thinking into this, and you've been really putting your best effort into this, and nothing has shifted in a year, I have more questions. I think that there's something in the blind spot. I think that there's more to be explored. And sometimes that is a very tangible thing. Sometimes there's, I work a lot in GI health, and you cannot take a body whose gut is on fire and expect the rest of the system to just self regulate because we gave it all the right nutrients, right? So sometimes there are things that need to be accounted for. But, and also there can be an energetic, psycho-spiritual, whatever you want to call that side of things, component to it as well. I see this a lot in the daughters of mothers who grew up with an obsession with being thin, an obsession with high performance, with being perfect. And they have daughters who have lifelong, let's call it obesity. Like their bodies just hold on to this padding, this protection. And I really believe I don't know the answer. There's no way to quantify this, but I think that sometimes there is more playing out in our bodies than just what our first person narrative of the story that we have access to is. So sometimes also when we're looking at someone's body, if this person's biomarkers are well, if their blood work looks good, if we've done the checks that I know to do and we've put the work in that I know to put in, and this person is telling me they're feeling good, always the compass, right? If you're not feeling good, then okay, nothing else matters, no matter what the lab work says. But if all of those things are good and we still have a person who's 20 or 30 pounds overweight, then I start asking deeper questions. First of all, like, is this okay for you? Can you be okay with this, right? Everything else looks good. Can you be okay with this? Or is there, and this is not my scope of practice, not an area that I necessarily support women with, but can we make a referral? Is there something that you're holding on to? Is there a fear? Is your body putting this padding to protect itself? We start to get a little bit more woo-woo with it. But those are sort of the layers that I go through. However, within a year of doing deep metabolic restoration work, if there truly is some sort of metabolic imbalance driving weight gain, like I would be so curious. If someone gains weight all at once, I have so many follow-up questions. What else was going on there? But I definitely think that within a year, if this is the goal and this is what the body needs to do, we should start to see the body take steps towards that. Maybe it's not your ideal, optimal weight, whatever number has been. I feel like a lot of women, they start in their 20s, there's like a number, and they hold on to that number. And I talk to women in their 50s and 60s who are still attached to that number. Sometimes we have to do work around that. So it might not be that number, but if there's weight that needs to be lost, we should start seeing the body releasing that within a year if we're on the right track. And if that's not what's happening, I think we're either not on the right track or we're missing something really important here.
Thank you. And you are helping me figure out some of the GI stuff because I think that is probably it. And my mom's story fits some of that. Not exactly, but I think about that a lot too.
Yeah.
What of my mom's story I'm carrying along with this weight. So thank you. And let's talk about how do people know how many calories they should be eating in a day?
Yeah. Okay. So my favorite calculation, now everyone's different. That's the eternal caveat that you can apply to every single thing I ever say. Depends on your body. That's just nutrition science in general. The answer is always it depends. But the calculation that I give my clients when we're talking about figuring out if they're eating enough calories is for most women, 14 to 16 calories per pound of body weight. Now, maybe if there is someone's really overweight, we might tweak that a little bit. We could say of healthy body weight, but we don't want to go too low, right? Even then. So 14 to 16 calories per pound of body weight. like I mentioned earlier, sometimes women will do a preliminary audit of their diet. They will find a 1,000 calorie discrepancy between what they are currently eating and what they need. Your body is smart. Your body has learned to function with the amount that you're giving it right now. So that's where maybe you want to increase slowly so that you don't totally shock your body, or go for it. Like, eat an extra 1,000 calories, see how you feel that day. Maybe you feel really good and energized, right? If not, then increase slowly. But important caveat that, pregnancy, breastfeeding, all of these really change that calculation. So this is just kind of baseline starting point. I can't think of many situations where it would be appropriate for a woman to eat less than like 1,800 calories. That, to me, that's quite low. So I say, no one should really be eating less than 2,000. Use your body weight, use this calculation. And if you feel better eating more, my goodness, if you're eating more than that number, that's fine. There's lots of cases and reasons why that would be true for you. But I don't really think anyone should be eating less than 14 calories per pound of body weight. There was a really cool study that came out when I was like really early postpartum. I had a baby that was a couple weeks old, and this huge nutrition study. There's a lot of nutrition studies that get published, but they're not always like actually cool and new. And there was one that they had collected samples from modern day hunter-gatherer societies all across the world to office workers, like every different type of person living every different type of lifestyle. And the takeaway from that was that it doesn't actually really matter whether you're sitting in a cubicle indoors or full-time running around hunting and gathering. The amount of energy that the human body expends will regulate. There isn't that big of a difference in BMR between even these two vastly different lifestyles. So the takeaway there is that every single person needs to eat. So this narrative that, okay, if you're a small woman and you're sedentary and blah, 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 it all roads lead to 1,200 calories for some reason in that conversation. That's actually not true. So this idea that if you're not moving enough, if you're not whatever, we all need to eat. My all food is good food is everyone needs to eat. There's really no situation in which it makes sense to vastly restrict calories. And now we have the research to prove it. It's really food quality that matters more than how much energy you're expending through movement in a day.
Wow, that's really interesting. Well, okay, that brings me to fasting. Someone asked about fasting. Should women ever be fasting is my question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I definitely don't think I have a yes or no answer to that. Actually, it's really interesting because before we started recording this, I was on a call with a client and she had done a fast at the beginning of the year, like a 3-day water fast or something. And I was like, whoa, that's like really radical and extreme. But really, in the context of a year, doing something like that one time, I don't really think it's going to harm someone. I wouldn't necessarily advocate for it, but I will acknowledge that there's research, when we look in the research on autophagy and those kinds of things, it's when fasting becomes a lifestyle. It's when fasting becomes the solution to, okay, well, I did this or I feel that way, so I'm just going to do a fast. It's when it becomes a rhythm that women fall into that I think it becomes really bad, to use like the most basic word possible, versus just naturally you have an illness and you maybe don't eat that much. You do your own sort of, body tells you to fast to heal. The intentional restriction of food down to short windows every single day or, 1 day a week or whatever, I don't think it's great. The most important thing to understand when it comes to fasting and women's bodies is that anything that's going to stress the body out is probably not a thing that we want to be exposed to in an ongoing way. Stress can be beneficial for the body, right? It's how we adapt. But when stress becomes regular and it becomes chronic, we don't benefit from it anymore and it starts to become really harmful. So there's, books, there's entire resources built around women and fasting. My general take is just, I don't think we need to do it, because the way that I approach nutrition is, if we're eating the right way every day, there isn't necessarily the need to do these extreme things short term to push the body, because the little opportunities to heal that it needs every single day, it will mostly have access to. But I also cannot deny the research on the Seventh-day Adventist population in California. They fast for 1 day a week. They have great outcomes from that, both women and men. And short-term fasting does seem to be beneficial. It's when it becomes, women obsessively are like, okay, I was bad and now I'm going to do my fast to make up for it. That's when we start to have a problem. When it becomes a tool that we are reaching for way too often is when I see the real downsides coming from it.
I want to address autophagy because I just saw this post the other day. It's from Jay Feldman, who I follow and I really like. And it's about, so he has in quotes, fasting is healthy because it increases autophagy. Are you sure? Let's see what other, quote, healthy things increase autophagy. And then as you click, he shows the studies. Alcohol increases autophagy. Dioxin, an industrial toxin, increases autophagy. Arsenic increases autophagy. Mercury. I'll put it down in the show notes if anyone wants to look into it. But that was just interesting to see, right? That,
yeah.
And I've seen other people like dismantle the autophagy argument before too. Yeah, it seems to me like something that's bio-individual, but if I was a public health guru, I would be telling women not to fast. That was a big piece of my life throughout my adulthood, especially in like the year before my crash. And I think it absolutely played a role in my crash.
Yeah. Especially if I think that's where, and it's interesting, all of those things that you listed about the autophagy, because all of those things almost have been used as healing tools in the past. Like mercury was actually one of the first, like that was a treatment pharmaceutically. So that's where we get the dose makes the poison, right? So there is something to it, right? But it's when exposure becomes chronic, there's this saying that adaptation is always less than the stress. Like you push the body, we'll use strength training, for example. You rip the muscle and the muscle rebuilds a little bit stronger, right? It's not going to be quite to the extent that it was ripped, but it's a little bit stronger. And the adaptation is less than the stress can be applied even to something like mercury exposure in certain contexts. And I am not an advocate of fasting. I understand why people are drawn to it. And that's why I always want to address the research and say, okay, yes, I hear where you're coming from. I hear why you would want to do that. And if you continue doing that, we're going to have a problem. What was your relationship with fasting? I'm really curious what that looked like for you.
Yeah, well, when I was 24, I worked at the Natural Food Co-op in Sacramento, and I did what started out as like a 5-day juice fast. I ended up going 13 days. And this was my pattern, is I would start with a small fast and then just keep going. Cause I'm like, I feel so good. And that seemed to be fine. I was young, I did the master cleanse. Everyone remembers that. Maple syrup, cayenne pepper for a couple of days. And I tried a pure water fast that time, but I threw up walking out to my car on the way to work on the second day. So I was like, okay, I should probably eat. And then I didn't fast for a long time until I got into my late 30s, and fucking Dave Asprey again, talking about ketosis and fasting, and like Stephen Herod Buhner, the herbalist who I really respect and was on my podcast at the beginning. He has a whole book about fasting. Not many people know about that book. It's a really cool book. And so for me, especially getting into my late 30s, looking back now, I was metabolically unwell. I was very low on energy. I felt pressed upon at all times. I felt like so much pressure on me from the world. And so for me, I was rereading my journals recently from this time period, and I fasted so much more than I remembered fasting. I was always looking for space. I was writing I just need some space. I need some space. When I'm fasting, I'm not thinking about what I'm eating. I'm not worried about eating. It just like gives me spaciousness in my life. And the month before my 40th birthday, I started a 3-day fast that I ended up extending to 18 days. And I'm taking in all this information online from other fasting advocates about all the amazing things it did for them. And so I'm just like, yeah, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. And I was doing like some juices, fruits and vegetables, some like coconut milks with herbs and stuff. So it wasn't completely nothing coming in. But finally, I think like on day 18, I was like, okay, yeah, it's time to start, eating again. And then that summer I got a gnarly COVID infection. I know a lot of people did, but I always wonder, would it have been that bad if I wasn't in such a depleted state? I passed a kidney stone like a month after that. And then I got a pelvic inflammatory disease flare up a month after that for the first time in many, many years. I thought I was done with PID. It came back, took the 3 rounds of antibiotics that you are prescribed when you have PID, because it can be fatal. So that's one where I always was like, no, I'm taking the antibiotics. And then the following year, 2022, is when I slowly started seeing like a decrease in my health until like that winter where I fully crashed out, gained a bunch of weight, couldn't get out of bed, had zero energy. I'm like, wow, if I hadn't done that 18-day fast, I think things might look different.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing all of that, because that is, I think, when we're talking about fasting, there's layers. My client who I mentioned earlier, like if she's listening to this, I feel the need to disclose that she is very well. We see each other. We're talking like an annual check-in at this point if she has specific questions. She is somebody who is a really good example of just great health, can absolutely tolerate something like a 3-day water fast. Again, not on my advice that she did this, wouldn't have given that advice. But Stephen Buhner, I've read all of his books too. Like he grew up, he talks about like swimming with his grandpa in the wild, uncontaminated rivers and just drinking the water straight. Like he experienced a very different baseline level of health and just nourishment than most of us modern women came in with. So for him to view fasting as medicinal, and then of course the population that he's working with is probably other people like him, they probably had a higher tolerance for that, right? And when somebody feels so much better when they're fasting, that is one of the things actually that really tips me off to gut stuff, because suddenly you've cut off you've cut off you're not flooded with the lipopolysaccharides anymore that all this activity in your gut is doing. So that whole trajectory of what happened to you after the 18-day, that is that is massive. And then you had all like the pelvic inflammatory disease. Okay, so once you started feeding the microbiome again, all the good guys that didn't survive because they're more delicate, fragile little flowers, but the more pathogenic bacteria have more staying power, right? So once they start eating again and their populations boom, and now there's no one there to compete with them, right? All the good people on the block moved out, so now they can invite their friends and grow their families. And pelvic inflammatory disease is linked with dysfunction in the microbiome. So to me, a story like that, I see it's hard sometimes for me to stay on one thread when I see the whole web. But when you see the whole web, it all makes perfect sense. Like, oh, of course that would happen to you. Yes, I too would be terrified of fasting after something like that. You should probably never fast again. And it could maybe be a really helpful tool for somebody in a very different state of health who, unfortunately, people like you or I are probably never going to relate to. A lot of the women listening, you're probably never going to benefit from the incredible baseline health that you need to have in order to benefit from fasting. But men like Stephen Herod Buhner, who came into this world before all of the damage was done and had reasonably healthy moms who weren't trying to be 100 pounds their whole life, probably could tolerate it and maybe benefit from it.
Yeah, you're right. That was another huge reason I love doing it and would keep going, is because like all my random symptoms are gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not digesting anything, so I'm having no digestive symptoms.
Yeah, it is. It's such a thing. So yeah, anyone who's listening who really is using fasting as a tool, it is not good for your long-term metabolic health. Your adrenals and your thyroid will eventually tell on you. You cannot. Eventually, you've got to pay the piper, right? It all just comes down to that. But I hear you. I see you. I believe you that you feel better when you're doing that. Look into your gut health is the best advice that I could give you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll report back, if we really uncover some things about my gut health and in our work together, which seems almost inevitable. So I think we should jump over to Patreon now, and I'm going to read the questions that we're going to address on Patreon. I'd like to know more about eating enough carbs for each meal and what is considered a healthy carb and how carbs affect adrenal health. And then another question is about cycle syncing with food. Should we be eating different foods at different points in our cycles? And would love to hear more about Hashimoto's. Would love to hear more about hormones and libido shift from undernourishment to nourishing your body properly. And then also a question about nutritional support for neurodivergent women. Okay. You ready? You ready to stop the recording and then start it again? Okay, thank you, Ashley. And then we're just going to have to record a whole nother episode about the other thing we talked about, possibly talking about that women will love to hear too. So, okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, you can tune into the rest of our conversation at patreon.com/medicine stories, where we are answering listener questions about carbs, libido, whether or not we should prioritize buying organic food, do we think we should change what we eat at different points in the menstrual cycle, and a nutritional consideration for neurodivergent or highly sensitive folks.
I have seen fiber do things that if there was a supplement that could do it, it would be the #1 top selling health product on the planet. It's hard. I was paralyzed when I was in school. I just bottomed out in terms of, not even like orthorexia. It was like afraid of toxicity. I was making my own dish soap because the unscented natural dish soap at the store wasn't safe enough. I would only eat organic. I know what it's like to live with that fear. If you identify as neurodivergent and you feel that this is occupying a lot of space in your life, then it's even more important for you to be eating enough, be getting these wide variety of nutrients, be well nourished, because that's what's going to help you stay regulated through whatever this is bringing up for you in your day to day.
The Healing Waters Nature Immersion Getaway in Costa Rica is November 3rd through 8th, 2026. And if you are listening to this on or before April 21st to 23rd only, those 3 days, you may use the coupon code TROVAVERSE200 for $200 off your ticket if you would like to join me. The link for that is below, along with that somewhat awkward coupon code. And our herbal body oils are extra potent elderberry elixir, our rites of passage gift bundles for menarche, conception and pregnancy, birth and postpartum, perimenopause and menopause, and grief and end of life, plus more herbal offerings, are all available at mythicmedicine.shop. Thanks so much for joining me and Ashley today. I loved this conversation, and I definitely plan on having Ashley back in the future because so many of you have asked for more, and there are many topics that we want to discuss. So until next time.